Hello BookTube. Today I'm going to be doing the home construction book tag. This tag was created by Steve Donahue as a bit of tag therapy to deal with the recent home construction that Hyde Cottage underwent this past month. So let's get going. Prompt number 1. 2 days, tops. Name a book that you were explicitly lied to about. So for this prompt, I'm going to go with Love in the Big City by Sang Young Park. Love in the Big City is a novel about a young gay Korean man who basically goes through life over a number of years. Where I was explicitly lied to about the book is that the book says it's a novel. On the cover, it says a novel. In actual fact, it is not a novel. Love in the Big City is a collection of 4 loosely connected novellas or longer short stories featuring who one presumes to be the same protagonist, but only the protagonist really recurs. The first story is about the narrator's friendship with his straight best friend. The second story is the narrator dealing with 2 rather toxic relationships. One, his mother, the other, a toxic boyfriend. The third is a relatively stable relationship. And the fourth is about a trip to Thailand. So, not and none of the characters really recur, or they don't. So these are largely novellas or long short stories, not a novel. Although, one understands why, of course, using the term novel, even when the work isn't really a novel, you can understand it. It's novels are the most popular form of fiction, and really longer short stories, novellas, don't really have much cachet. Although, particularly with science fiction and fantasy, that is changing. Tor.com puts out a whole raft of longer novellas as part of their Tor.com novellas line. Although, those are really short novels, not novellas, but that's a whole nother rant. So let's go to prompt number 2. If we don't do it now, it'll be too late. Name a totally unnecessary book. For this, I'm going to go with Priest of Gallows by Peter McLean. Priest of Gallows is the 3rd book in the War for the Rose Throne at the time trilogy. It's now going to be a tetralogy. And it's the story of, and so the trilogy as a whole is about a military priest named Thomas Piety, who, when he was younger, was a crime lord in his home city of Ellenberg. He, along with much of his crew, his sort of underlings, were drafted to fight a war, along with a number of other criminals from Ellenberg. Having survived the war and being given a sort of a priest's commission, Thomas returns with the survivors of his unit. He joins up with his brother and returns to Ellenberg to take back his streets. In so doing, he is approached by agents of the Queen's Men, a sort of a intelligence police. It's sort of basically a mix of, in Britain, it would be a mix of MI5 and MI6 with the KGB, SMERSH thrown in. And here in the States, it would be the FBI and CIA with, again, SMERSH, the KGB thrown in as sort of. But anyway, so And so his mission is to prevent a rival nation from getting a toehold in Ellenberg by their sort of support for rival crime lord gangs. And so that's basically the first book. The second book is him continuing and trying to fight the um, rival nation states' influence in Ellenberg, as well as eventually sort of getting a job as a member of the Queen's Men himself on his own terms, which is where the third book comes in, and it's basically him performing various missions for the Queen's Men as an active Queen's Man himself and not just one of their pawns. The problem is that the Queensman plot is the worst part of this series. I really loved Priest of Bones, and I quite enjoyed Priest of Lies, except for what I call the Dansburg middle. Dansburg's the capital of the country, which is just Crater's book, the novel, and basically what I read of Priest of Gallows, it was just one gigantic Dansburg middle. It was so bad and so unnecessary and just no. So that's my answer for prompt number 2. Prompt number 3. This will be cheap, probably free. What's the most hideously expensive book you've ever bought? For this, I'm going to go with the Norton Anthology of Criticism and Theory. I think that's what it's called. It's I was an English lit major in college, and I went briefly for graduate school as well. And one of the books I had to buy for that class was the Norton Anthology of Theory and Criticism. And it's expensive. I mean, of course, books for university are always expensive, particularly the big anthologies. But normally there's a bit of a discount because they're used. Unfortunately, I think a new edition of the Norton had just come out, and so that was the one being used, and so I did not buy my copy used. It was full price. And I don't recall what the price was, but I'm thinking it was probably well near $100. Maybe a little bit cheaper, but it was expensive. Outside of that academic price or needing to buy books for classes, the most expensive book I ever bought because I wanted to, not because I had to, would be The Glorious Foods of Greece by Diane Kakillis, which is a Greek focused cookbook that was one of the books that I've wanted to add to my collection forever. I was, for a time when I was younger, in my early 20s, a member of a book club, sort of like the science fiction book club and the history book club, but this one was focused on cookbooks. And one of the books I picked up from them was The Glorious Foods of Greece, which I adored. Unfortunately, I did a few years later get rid of it as I really wasn't cooking anymore. But I've always wanted that book back. And so I decided a few years ago to get it back, and the only copy that was available, or the cheapest copy that was available, was for like $30, which is the most I've $35, I think, was the most egregiously expensive book I've ever bought. So, prompt number 4. You won't notice we're here. Name a book that constantly gets in your way. For this prompt, I'm going to go with, there's no real physical book that kind of gets in my way. Although I guess I could say the Fairy Tales of Hans Christian Andersen would, I guess, be a good answer for this one. It's oversized. I don't have it on any of my shelves. I actually use it as sort of the base, the foundation for a book tower, to sort of act as a bookend for the books that are on the top shelf of my headboard bookcase. The other end is a lamp. So I'll go with that one. Prompt number 5. No, this isn't asbestos. Name a book that was really, really bad for you. For this prompt, I don't really quite have an answer for it for this prompt, or none that really have jumped out to me. There is one answer, but that one really works a bit more for the last prompt. But so I'm going to kind of marry this one to the final prompt. Prompt number 6. We'll clean up at the end of every day. Name a book that was a total mess. I could go with Love in the Big City, I think, was a bit of a mess. Again, because of the whole, it's really for novellas, not a novel. As a novel, it kind of doesn't quite work. But I would go with maybe The Hanged Man by Katie Edwards. The Hanged Man is a sequel to The Last Sun. It's the second volume in the Tarot sequence, and it's basically an alternate urban fantasy series in which Atlantis was real and their political structure is sort of mirrors, or in this case, it would have inspired the tarot, particularly the major arcana. And in the Hanged Man, Max, the main character, not Max, Rune has to protect his young ward, Max, from an unwanted marriage alliance or marriage contract to the Hanged Man, another member of the Arcana, who's a very bad individual. And the book is just a mess. It tries to, I think, correct a lot of the issues that were present in The Last Sun, and unfortunately it wasn't done very well, and I don't think Katie Edwards really can juggle that many characters. He's fine with a core group, but once it gets too big it kind of starts to fall apart, and there's just a lot of the story was just it was a mess. So I'll go with that one. And finally, prompt number 7. You'll love the results. Trust us. Name a book that blighted your life and made you seriously consider burning all your possessions and going to Tierra del Fuego under an assumed name, living in a small village for the rest of your life, and when you finally die, thoroughly broken soul, having the local villagers say, "We never really knew anything about him, but we saw him sitting on the wharf every night, staring out at the sea with tears streaming down his face." I'm assuming the home construction was rather nightmarish for Steve. So for this, and also for prompt number 5, I'm going to go with Fate of the Fallen by Kel Cade. This is I don't know if it's a standalone or if it's the first book in a series, but basically its conceit is that when a chosen one is needed to save the world, what happens when that chosen one is killed at the start of the adventure? Unfortunately, in this case, not a very good book. It was so bad, in fact, that it basically killed my interest in science fiction and fantasy. I read it in the tail end of 2019, and it was just so bad. And my reading of science fiction and fantasy has never recovered. In the 2.5 years since, I've really only enjoyed 3 works of science fiction and fantasy. So that's just, yeah. And I'm still sort of trying to mentally process what happened. So that is my answer for this prompt. So anyway, that was the home construction book tag. If you would like to do this tag, consider yourselves tagged, and I will see you Friday with weekly reads and maybe um, the penguin tag that's going around. Although I might hold off on that until Monday because I do want to do a bit of work with that, and I need to kind of figure out the mechanics of that. So anyway, BookTube, I will definitely see you on Friday for weekly reads. No videos tomorrow because I will be watching the 4 Children of the Apocalypse. Wish me luck. So until I see you next time, BookTube, thank you, have a great afternoon, and stay safe.